see you here today. I'm glad that you are able to get here. You cannot hear me. You can hear me now. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Glad that you're here. This is my first foray at running the meeting, so I'm going to kick us off with ringing the bell, and then what I'd like for you to do is to greet the people around you and just, you know, we have a good group of folks that when I was asked why am I in Rotary, I had to say it was because of the people that I got to meet. Philip, one of them, I mean, my goodness, he was such a, Bill, I mean, that whole table over there, I wanted to hang out with them. So anyway, why don't we stand and greet each other right now. Let's start wrapping things up, and I want to call Walt MARCUM to come up and lead the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the National Anthem. Mark? There you are.
I'll try not to mess up.
You're not going to mess up. You're going to do a great job.
He's documenting. I checking that one off the list too. All right. Would you pray with me? Creator and sustainer of all that is and all that will be, accept our thanks for this day and all the blessings that we share. Help us to be ever mindful of the opportunities to render our service to our community and to the world beyond. Help us to keep in mind always the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in those areas and on those things upon which future generations can build. Guide us in our service. Bless those people around the world who are touched by our works so that they too can have the joy of a fulfilling life, good health, companionship, and surroundings that are beneficial. We ask that you guide and direct our club, its leaders, and our actions. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to Rotary, to our community, to the country, and indeed to all countries and peoples. Bless our fellowship today and bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies. In your service, amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A few weeks ago, we had a time of, everybody seemed to be very, very happy because the Happy Bucks little box just kept going around this room. And I'm wondering if today's going to be the same way. Who is happy and would like to place some money in this box, and who would take the microphone around to everybody so that you can do that? Would anybody do that? You're happy. Okay. Here, I'll take it. Will you? Here's that.
Might as well. Hold on, Bob. Hold on.
Okay. Let's get it in here.
Apparently it's money first, then you can talk.
Oh, okay. I paid my dues. Yeah. Had a couple things to be happy about. One is I talked to our fellow member, Scott McLaughlin. If you remember, he had a stroke back in December. He's recovering wonderfully and is up, and he would have been here today, except he had a major conflict. He couldn't move. So that's good news for him. And on my Meals and Wells route yesterday, I did a little back of the envelope calculation, and looked like yesterday, that would have been my, if my math is right, I've been here, remember, for 50 years now. So I joined my family. Sam, where are you at anyway? So thank you.
Now that's something to be happy about. Anyone else? Happy Bucks. We got somebody. Okay, Kathy is over here.
Thank you, sir. Last weekend I wasn't here because I had gone out to DFW. I was one of the speakers for pets, just for our district, and talking about going to Singapore. And after one of the zone meetings, after our incoming president for Rotary International got off the stage, I was walking towards her, and she goes, "Hey, Kathy, how's it going?" Thump, 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 thump. And I said, "Very well." And she asked me, "Are you still up for traveling? You told me that you'd go traveling with me." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, that's true." And I have been personally invited by the incoming president from Rotary International to attend the Rotary Peace Conference in Istanbul next February.
All right. Congratulations. That is wonderful. Anyone else want to share a happy thought?
It's kind of a tough one to follow.
Well, we need to introduce the guests now. Since you have the microphone, you look like you're doing a great job. So, Lee, do we have any guests that need to be introduced today?
Let's start over on this side. Here we go. I'm only making this trip across the room once. I'm not as nice as Richard Stanford.
Would you stand up? Okay. Raymond Douglas Hauser is an author with a very experienced history, but the author part of it, he has a book called The Winning Advantage. Don't we all want the winning advantage? Well,
Amen.
here you go. So what do you want to say? One sentence about your book.
Well, it's a book to help offset the inadvantages of setbacks and discouraging moments in building any business. It's called The Winning Advantage, and how do you do that?
We all have disappointing.
Glad you're here today. Other guests?
Anybody else? Anybody else going once? Going twice? That was way too easy.
Oh, we got...
I'm excited to introduce Paul Reed, who was a classmate of mine at Hillcrest. And I really want you to know he's our speaker on May 10th. Stand up. And he has authored 2 books. He has been on the Today Show. He had a 6-page article on him in People magazine.
Wow.
And he had a documentary that went with him to Vietnam back in the days when, 68. His story is incredible, so I hope you'll be here on May 10th. And he just spoke to the Carrollton Rotary on Veterans Day. So all of a sudden, I've known him forever. And when he said he spoke to Rotary, I was like, why didn't I think about that? So he'll be here on May 10th.
Thank you for coming. Anyone else? Thank you, Lee. Greg Pape, if you wouldn't mind coming up and giving us a word about Rotary Foundation. You always have at least one word that you can share with us. Isn't that right?
Yep.
Love to hear it.
Thank you, incoming president. You know, our fiscal year comes to a close June 30th. And Nolan, that's going to be your first sleepless night.
Oh.
But we look forward to your leadership, we really do. And we appreciate that Nolan Duck is a Paul Harris Society member, has been for quite a few years, and those are individuals giving each and every year $1,000. So we have Rick Amesbury is back with us as a Paul Harris Society. I don't think he's here today. He's taken a little hiatus because he's getting a theology degree, and he'll graduate from Duke University with this theology degree. But he gave me a check last Friday when he was here, and he's back in as a Paul Harris Society, and we have 22 members in our club that hold that status or distinction. We are quickly approaching 30,000 in contributions, thanks to the most recent contributions from Philip Bankhead and Sarah Ollier. Thank you both for those contributions. For this fiscal year, yes, Charlotte, yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. We appreciate that. And just wanted to allow a little structure to your giving, because the more information you have about the foundation, I think the more you are inspired to give. And that is, based on the 2022-23 model for giving, there were 473 district grants. These are funds that are short-term, goal-oriented. Global grant, that's just the global grant area of the foundation. Then there's the disaster response grants, 324 worldwide. One of Ruth Alali's favorite, I don't think she's here today. Ruth, where are you? Golly, because she gave specifically to the Ukraine effort, and 2 years after the Russians invaded Ukraine, the Rotary Foundation created a special relief fund which raised, any guess, over $17 million. And the Ukraine Rotary Club, District 2232, is the one that administered and distributed the funds, and of course they applied themselves toward shipments of medicine, medical equipment, ambulance, heating, fuel, and other relief items. And thank you, Ruth, again, for your very significant contribution in that specific area of the Rotary Foundation. So, last but not least, I want to brag on our Sergeant of Arms, Van Oliver. Hey, Van. He's so modest, understated. And I'll bring this to you, Van, but I'm holding in my hand a third-level contribution to the Rotary International Foundation. Thank you, Van Oliver. Thank you.
Congratulations. That's great. One of the things that we, Sarah Olia and I learned when we were at PETS is hadn't really dawned on us about the international work that is going on. But if our club were to raise $10,000 for an international project, now there's a lot of work that goes with that, don't get me wrong. The district will match that with $20,000, so we would have $30,000 to go accomplish something significant that our club would like to accomplish. So that's a pretty cool thing. So that's a part of the work of the Rotary Foundation. Mary Bishop, would you come up and give us our marketplace advertising word?
Hello. Well, I have the privilege of doing the marketplace for Happy Franklin. As you guys know, there's a saying, a merry person goes around doing good. That's our Happy. She's a wonderful, generous to our club. She sponsors this twice a year. If any of you want to be a sponsor, we really need you. So just think about it. And you get to be highlighted twice a year, and you have a scrolling ad. So let's talk about Happy. Financial advisor. She cares. She has a law degree as well as being a financial advisor. But her goal is to make life easier for you. And starting as early as possible, as she would say, putting towards retirement, insurance, and the different tools that she has at her hand. But what she, I think, if you would agree with me, is having been past president twice, she has great leadership skills and administration. So when you invest with her and use her advice, you will find a great reward and an increase in your financial well-being. So I think, would you please consider using Happy? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And having new members in our club is really a great thing, something that we enjoy, something that we celebrate, and each of our new members has the opportunity to share a word or two about themselves, to introduce themselves. So I'm going to invite Walt Markham to come up and lead us. He just led the prayer a moment ago, so come up and share a little bit about yourself. Walt?
Good to be here. I am from West Texas. Anybody else? We know the difference between a We know the difference between a sandstorm and a dust storm, right? Yeah. Grew up in Odessa. My dad worked in the oil field his entire life as a rig builder and iron worker. I'm a proud graduate of Odessa Junior College. Let's hear that. Then worked my way towards Abilene, Texas, small Methodist school called McMurray. You heard of that? Wonderful experience. And then finally made it to SMU, did my graduate work at the seminary there, met Barbara, my third year there, and we had the opportunity to have a wonderful life serving churches. First out in the Paris, Texas area, they gave Barbara a big church, gave me 5 small ones. Says a lot about her. They trusted her more. We spent some time out in the Rockwall area, a little town called Heath. We worked in East Dallas, White Rock Methodist Church, and then in 1992, I got a chance to go to Highland Park Methodist Church. And I worked there with the youth for decades, which meant that most of that was mission work, believe it or not. Try going on a mission trip with 187 junior highs. Yeah, yeah. Did I love every trip? Yes. Did I miss it? Absolutely not. Okay. So I'm still over there, still having fun. The Rotary connection is back in the late 70s. Barbara's dad was two things. He was a Roman Catholic and he was a Rotarian. And he would never miss any week, either one. That's back when you had to, if you missed, you had to do a makeup. And so I went with, he was a downtown club. But I went with him to various clubs and always admired him for that. Barbara joined the club a few years ago and kind of, I think, just kind of an honor and memory of her dad. And so when Barbara said, would you be interested, that was a chance for us to do something together. And it involves mission and service. So I was all in. Thank you.
Well, there's some announcements that we need to cover right now. The Friday, March the 29th, is Good Friday, and so we will not be meeting on that Friday. The 29th of March, last Friday of March, we're not going to be here. So if you show up, it's, you know, you're going to be eating by yourself. So anyway, Saturday, March the 30th, is a March Madness event that is being held. It's the over-under sports bar, and you can register online, is from noon to 3 o'clock. So if you'd like to attend that. Saturday, April the 6th, is the Dallas Crawfish Festival from 5 to 8 at FERRIS PLAZA. I think it's $41 to register to go to that, so you can go online and do that, or see Herb. Where's Herb? Right there. He's the guy to talk to about the Crawfish Festival. He's the man. So he's kind of running that show. Then on Monday the 15th, the program committee will be meeting, and that's going to be from 6 to 8 at the Moody YMCA. Now, one of the things that you might not realize, you may not know that you signed up to be on this committee when you joined Rotary. That means all of us, the two things that we do all together is the parade, that's everybody's involved in that, and then the program committee. So please come and share your ideas, things that you, people that you want to hear from, programs that you would like to have. And Richard is one of the leaders, and Jeff, where's Jeff Brady? He's the other. These guys are leading out in this effort, and really, we have great programs. Great programs because of these men and the whole club, for that matter, who come together to do that. There's pizza, so you can come and get pizza too. So, you know, if you're really hankering for some pizza, you will have some that day or that night. And then Friday, April the 26th, is a Rough Riders baseball game, and you can register online on our website to do just that. I believe that now is the time for the raffle drawing, and Lee Wagner, who was faithfully out there selling raffle tickets, he is kind of running the show. And thank you for picking the winner. You didn't realize that you're going to be picking a winner today. The amount that you'll be drawing for is $89. So the ticket, get your tickets out if you have one. The last four digits are 0818. Who has 0818? Anybody? Somebody has to have it.
Whoever was right after me.
Okay, this was not, there was nothing untoward about this. I got it.
Somebody else found the cards.
You got to hold the card. We're going to keep it as honest as we can, you know, is it the truth? All right, okay, the ace of spades is what I'm going for, but, you know, it I may not get it. And you're trying to keep me from getting that card. It's a spade, but it's a 6. I get to keep this card as a souvenir of my failure. So anyway, thank you so much. Oh, I got to give you this back. Here we go. Here's the spade. We don't have to conduct it on. Yep. An audit will be coming soon, I'm sure, on that. The chair of the day is Ed Forback. So if you would come up and share with us more about our speaker, sure would appreciate it, Ed.
Thank you, Duck. Well, colleagues, I do first have some concerns about the direction of this club. You had a lawyer speak to you last week. Now you've got a lawyer introducing somebody. We have a table over here that's 30% lawyers, and I'm about to introduce another lawyer to speak to you, and this could perjure the entire club's reputation. Mercifully, next week, I think you get Jeremy Strick from the Nasher Museum, so you get a little bit of relief. I'm hoping that's helpful, and maybe we'll cast a different light on the club in the public's eye. Before I meet or introduce Ann Drumm, I want to also introduce her colleague, Mike Martin, over here, and Mike is going to take the second half of today's presentation. And I don't know a lot about Mike, but I can tell you he was originally in Connecticut and made his way to Ohio, somehow went to college there and ended up in Houston and finally Dallas. He was in the business of financial printing. And if you've ever seen one of those old printed prospectus, or prospecti, for which there's a deadline that the SEC requires you file these things and so on. And in one of my classes, ethics classes, I teach about how somehow that prospectus was redone at the last minute when Facebook was about to go public, and only the wealthy got the fresh prospectus. The other people didn't get the fresh prospectus, and so that's an interesting ethical story. Why did that happen? Anyway, they don't print these things on paper much anymore, so Mark is retired from this business, and Mike is now volunteering here with American Promise. More from him a little later. Ann Drumm here's a local Dallasite, went to Green Hill School, ended up in SMU Law School, and did time as a lawyer for a little while, then raised a family. And once the family was getting raised, she started getting involved in the community, and particularly she was interested in the climate change problem we have. Kind of plugged into that, but eventually got plugged into something called America's Promise. It concerned her, as it does many of us in this room, that big money influences politics to a great degree, perhaps more than it should. And yet, here in the United States, corporations that swing big money around are treated by our Constitution as if they are a person, except for the Fifth Amendment clause that says you don't have to testify against yourself in a court of law. They don't get that privilege, and a few other things, the 14th Amendment, what have you. So we have a lot of big money influencing our elections and our political scene, and that concerned Ann. She got involved in America's Promise, and America's Promise is, importantly, a nonpartisan organization. I ran into Ann some function, and she told me what she's doing, and that she was holding, or America's Promise was holding a panel discussion of this issue at Park City Club about 18 months ago, and I mentioned that I was teaching at UNT and teaching business law and business ethics. She said, well, if any of your students would like to come, well, I had 23 of my students show up, dressed up pretty nicely, and they were just fascinated by what they heard that day. And it didn't cost them a dime thanks to the Hatton Sumners Foundation. And Ann's husband is on the board of the Hatton Sumners Foundation. He too is a lawyer. Mercifully, he didn't come today to spoil the mix here. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Ann Drumm, and she's going to talk to us about America's Promise, and she has a printout here. If you can't read what's on the screen, you have it in front of you. Ann?
Thank you, Ed, and thank y'all to the Rotary very much. I am so excited to be here today. I'm looking forward to talking to you about money and politics. So, as Ed explained, I am a volunteer with American Promise, which is a national nonpartisan organization committed to restoring the people's voice in government by ending the corrosive influence of money in American politics. Political spending by wealthy special interests is drowning out the voices of ordinary Americans. But what if I told you that fixing this problem is one big project that can unite Americans? That Americans across the political spectrum, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, want to fix this problem, and that fixing it will allow us to make headway on a number of issues that Americans really care about. So what I want to do today is dive into some data and explore the opportunity we have to do historic good for our country. And I was advised that some of you will not be able to see the screen. You've got a handout with you. It doesn't have all the slides, but I will call your attention to the slides that I did reproduce on the handout. Last year, the Pew Research Center asked Americans to describe the state of politics. And these are some of the words they came up with: divisive, corrupt, messy, bad, polarized, dysfunctional. You get the picture. Americans have lost faith in politics and government. Now, when we said the Pledge of Allegiance a few minutes ago, we pledged allegiance to a republic. In a direct democracy, everybody comes together at the same time and votes, but a republic is based on a scheme of representation. And when our founders, including James Madison, established a republic, this was a revolutionary idea. Nobody had ever created a system of governance based on the idea of popular sovereignty, the idea that the people are the legitimate source of the government's power and authority. And they decided to implement this idea of popular sovereignty through a scheme of representation. So the essential element of a republic is a relationship between constituents, the people in the big red circle, and their representative. And this is a sacrosanct relationship. But we have evolved a system where other forces are encroaching on that relationship. And this is the first slide on your handout. We have money from outside of the district, we have super PACs, and we have dark money groups from outside the district, outside of the state, even outside of the country, competing with constituents for the attention and the vote of their representatives. And money is undermining this relationship between constituents and their representatives. And that undermines the whole idea of a system of representation based on the idea of popular sovereignty. And when money undermines this relationship, constituents become suspicious, with reason, that their interests and priorities are not necessarily the priorities of their representative. And they become angry, and they respond to surveys like Pew's with the kind of words that we saw. And they become cynical, and many of them just drop out and quit participating because they throw up their hands and they ask, what's the point? So there are many ways that this can play out, but I want to just describe one that we are pretty familiar with. For the last couple of decades, Congress has been trying to rein in the rising cost of prescription drugs. Now, think back to 2004 when Medicare Part D was enacted. The pharmaceutical industry, through its lobbying arm, Big Pharma, used the power of its political spending to protect the profits on the sale of drugs that are paid for with tax dollars. And this persisted until 2022, when Congress finally passed some legislation allowing a limited amount of price negotiation. And now Big Pharma is in court trying to invalidate that legislation, calling it unconstitutional. So Big Pharma is still using its money to protect its profits. And the root cause of Congress's dysfunction on drug prices and many other issues that Americans care about is the grip that money has on our political system. And that grip of money on our system has become a threat to democracy. A CBS News poll last year found that 72% of Americans believe that democracy is under threat, and they point to the same root cause. Republicans and Democrats alike who believe democracy is under threat, overwhelmingly, 86% of them said money in politics is the primary culprit. And there is good reason for them to point to money in politics. Look at the second slide on your handout. This is the spending in presidential campaign cycles on presidential and congressional elections. That top bar is spending in 2020, and as you can see, it is more than double the spending in the previous presidential cycle, 2016. This graph, also on your handout, shows the 5 most expensive Senate races in 2022, which are the purple bars, compared to 2010, which are the pink bars. So the purple bars in 2022 are Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Ohio. That purple bar on the left is the Georgia Senate race in 2022. We saw almost $500 million spent to elect one senator from a swing state. And you should know that the vast majority of that money that went into the Georgia Senate election came from outside of Georgia. So all of this money raises the cost for everyone of running for office, federal office, state office, even local office. And it's estimated that members of Congress spend between 30 and 70% of their time raising money. And it starts on day one when they arrive in Washington, D.C. to serve their terms. So this slide is on your handout. This is a sample schedule given to members of Congress by party leadership on the first day when they arrive in D.C. And what you can tell from this schedule is that leadership is suggesting they spend 4 hours a day in call time. Now, call time is that time that they spend not in their congressional office on Capitol Hill, because this would be illegal. They have to go over to a party office across the street with a donor list and a telephone to dial for dollars, just like a telemarketer. And this is time that they are not spending studying legislation, building relationships, particularly those critical relationships across the aisle that would let them get stuff done, or tending to constituent needs. I want to talk about dark money, which is the political spending where the source of the money is not disclosed. So let's say you've got a little bit of money to spend on politics, but you don't want the public to know that you are the source of the spending. How can you get your money into the system and retain your anonymity? Well, you give it to a so-called social welfare organization that is constituted under Section 501C of the Internal Revenue Code. These are these dark money organizations that do not disclose their donors. So let me give you an example of how this fits into the scheme. And this slide is also at the bottom of the first page of your handout. Let's say we have an ordinary guy. He's got a little bit of money he can spend on politics. So what can he do? Well, he can give to congressional campaigns. He's limited, $3,300 per campaign per election cycle. He can also give to traditional political action committees, very likely his employer's corporate PAC. He can give $5,000. And of course, the vast majority of Americans don't have anywhere close to that much money that they can spend on politics. But the point is, there are limits. Now, let's say we've got a Mr. Moneybags. He also wants to spend some money on politics. He can do the same things that our ordinary guy can do, subject to the same limits, but he can do so much more. He can give unlimited amounts of money to as many super PACs as he wants to. Now, these groups do disclose their donors, and then they, in turn, can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our elections. Mr. Moneybags can give unlimited amounts of money to as many dark money groups as he wants to. They don't disclose their donors. They also can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our elections. The main limitation on what super PACs and dark money groups can do is that their spending has to be independent of campaigns. They're not supposed to coordinate with campaigns. It's, yeah, that is a laugh line, isn't it? It is also worth pointing out that these avenues of spending that are available to Mr. Moneybags are also available to corporations, unions, LLCs, and other artificial entities. So this slide, which is also on your handout, on the back side of the handout, this shows the growth in dark money since 2010, and there are two things to take away from this graph. One is just to see the explosion in the amount of dark money that has come into our system in the last 12 years. The other is to notice that dark money benefits both Republicans and Democrats. Early on, dark money tended to benefit Republicans more. In the last two cycles, it has benefited Democrats more. But the bottom line is Republicans and Democrats are both playing the dark money game. This is not a partisan problem. This is a systemic problem. Dark money is the vehicle through which foreign interests get money into our campaign system. Now, it is still illegal for foreign corporations and individuals to donate directly to U.S. campaigns. But they can give unlimited amounts of money to dark money groups, which then can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our elections. And the dark money groups and the super PACs move money back and forth and between each other in very complicated ways that are designed to obscure the true source of the money. Maine right now is the focus of the fight over foreign money. In 2023, Maine voters approved overwhelmingly a ballot measure to forbid foreign-owned corporations from spending money to influence Maine elections. They approved it with 86% of the vote. And then the foreign government-owned corporations and media companies that are affected by the new law sued to invalidate it, claiming that they have a First Amendment right to spend unlimited amounts of money, even to spend it anonymously to influence Maine elections. So this question now of foreign money in the U.S. political system is going through the litigation process in Maine, and we are watching that litigation. Maine is also an example of another phenomenon we've seen, which is the increase in money crossing state lines to influence elections. So think back to that slide I showed you of Georgia Senate race in 2022 and almost $500 million that came from outside of Georgia. Now think about the Maine Senate race in 2020. Susan Collins was in a heated battle for re-election. $200 million was spent to influence that election in this little bitty state that has 1.3 million people. And the vast majority of that $200 million came from outside of Maine, and it bought up all of the TV and radio airtime so that the local Maine candidates couldn't get their message out to their voters. Local candidates literally had their voices drowned out by the power of the out-of-state money. This is Republican State Senator David Trahan, who described it as being 20 feet under snow in an avalanche, and no one could hear us. So how did we get here? It wasn't always this way. 100 years ago, as a result of Gilded Age corruption, Congress and state legislatures passed common sense campaign finance regulation with the intention of prohibiting corporate money in elections and reining in the power of the industry titans who had too much power in government. But over the course of the last almost 50 years, a series of decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court has dismantled those efforts to rein in the corruption of money. And it started with the 1976 case Buckley versus Vallejo. And this is when the court announced the proposition that money, political spending, is speech. And it said that because we protect speech under the First Amendment, then Congress and states no longer have the ability to regulate the raising and spending of money to influence our elections. And what this did was it unleashed the floodgates for money to enter our system. It enabled the creation of super PACs and dark money groups that can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money. But the court was wrong. Money isn't speech. Money is power. And when you create a system where people have disproportionate political power just because they have more money, then you undermine the entire idea of a republic with a scheme of representation based on the idea of popular sovereignty. So this crisis of money in politics is a call to citizenship. It is a call to action, and we have a solution. The 4-hour freedom constitutional amendment will restore the power of Americans to regulate election spending so that we can protect our freedom, have our voices heard, and participate as equal citizens in our government. Now, your handout has the text of the entire proposed constitutional amendment. It is 3 short paragraphs, but I want to highlight the language in Section 2 because that is the operative language, and it reads as follows. Nothing in this Constitution shall be construed to forbid Congress or the states within their respective jurisdictions from reasonably regulating and limiting contributions and spending in campaigns, elections, or ballot measures. So what this amendment will do is remove the obstacle that the court put in place when it declared that political spending is protected speech. And it will restore the power of Congress to pass reasonable regulation pertaining to federal elections, and each state legislature can pass reasonable regulations pertaining to state elections. We can get to that. So this amendment has overwhelming bipartisan public support. A survey in 2018 found that 3/4 of Americans across the political spectrum support it. But I want to show you some more recent polling that is specific to Texas. Citizen Data polled on 3 questions, and these are on your handout. They polled last year. First question asked Texans, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The influence of money in politics is a threat to our democracy. 84% of the respondents in Texas either strongly or somewhat agreed with the proposition that all this money is a threat to democracy. Next question, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Individuals and entities should be able to spend unlimited amounts of money to influence our campaigns and elections. And the respondents in Texas, 74% of them disagreed that we should have unlimited spending. And then finally, they were asked this, a proposed constitutional amendment would allow Congress and the states to reasonably regulate and limit money in our campaigns and elections. Would you support or oppose this amendment? And 76% of Texas respondents said they would support it. No other advocacy for a constitutional amendment has ever begun with this degree of bipartisan public support. And American Promise is mobilizing this public support with a network around the state to build support for the passage and ratification of the 4-hour freedom constitutional amendment. So at this point, I want to invite my colleague Mike Martin, who is also a volunteer in our chapter, to finish up this presentation, then we'll go into some Q&A.
Thank you, Ann. So the goal of the organization, like this Rotary Club, we're looking for people to help us get meetings with representatives. If you look at the slide here, on the left, you'll see that we had our team meet with the representative Keith Self. On the right picture, some of us met with the staff of Rep. Ronnie Jackson. We've also met with Beth Van Dyne and her staff 3 times. We wanted to meet with other members of the congressional delegation, not just from North Texas, but from around the state. I invite you to help us get and participate in those meetings. We will train you on the substance of how we talk about the subject and the For Our Freedom Amendment, and also on the ways that we structure a meeting with an elected official. Another way to help us is to arrange invitations for us to speak to groups like chambers of commerce, clubs, other civic groups. We know that the Rotary Club network together, so please help us get invitations to speak to other Rotary clubs. I completely understand the reluctance of Rotary to have presentations on topics that are political. We get that politics can easily devolve into unpleasantness. A lot of that anger is about people justifiably believing that their voices aren't being heard. By now, I hope that you see that divisiveness is not what we're about at American Promise. We're here to show how Americans can come together, leave partisan politics behind, and accomplish historic good for the country by strengthening the relationship between constituents and the representatives. We want to help build peaceful communities. Finally, I invite you to show your support for our Freedom Amendment by taking the Citizen Pledge. You can access our pledge page with the QR code that's on the screen right now, or go to americanpromise.net/pledge. I'll leave this screen up for a couple of minutes. I want to thank you again for allowing us to speak today. We look forward to having a few minutes of discussion now. And who's got the first question? Ann's going to take most of them.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
First of all, thank both of you for coming. Not a more important topic that we can spend our time learning about. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
2 tough questions, okay? The first, is there any way, and I think I know the answer, is there any way for us to know or determine what foreign nations are spending the most currently to influence our elections? I think I know who it might be, but can we determine that at all? And the second question is, an amendment to the U.S. Constitution is extraordinarily difficult to do. When was the last time this happened, and who is on your side in this fight?
Okay, so the sources of foreign money, the whole point of dark money is that it's hard to trace. So the organization Open Secrets, which tracks money in politics, is the one I would point to as the best source of information about where the money is coming from. And I do not have any data off the tip of my fingers about, who are the biggest players in putting money into American elections, but that's where I would have you go look if you wanted to see what is known about that. You are right, the process of getting a constitutional amendment is difficult. But we take heart from several things. One is the high level of public support for this. Our challenge is really not persuading the public. The public is already with us. Our challenge is persuading Congress and then state legislatures that they should change the rules of the game. And I think there are some powerful arguments to make, and that's why we go in and meet with members of Congress to make those arguments. And the number one argument is they hate this system. They hate being telemarketers for re-election. And it's one of the biggest things they complain about when they leave office and are free to talk about how they really feel. So I think that our advocacy, coupled with the strong public support, is the way to get system change. We have had what Jeff Clements, our founder, calls constitutional moments in American history, when constitutional amendments tend to come in clusters. So, you look at the early founding with the Bill of Rights, you look at the post-Civil War period, you look at the Progressive era, you look at the Civil Rights era. Jeff thinks that we are in another of those turning points when Americans see that our representative democracy needs to be preserved and strengthened, and that some of the strengthening can be done through legislation, but in this particular case, this is not a problem Congress can solve with a bill. We have to amend the Constitution. Yes?
Why do you think why can't you just change the campaign finance laws rather than
right? Why can't you just
amending the Constitution?
Right.
Because I think that's going to be terribly difficult.
So let me explain. It's why can't we just have Congress deal with this by changing campaign finance laws? It has to do with the way the court interpreted the meaning of the word speech under the First Amendment. It is the court's purview to interpret our Constitution. So sometimes when the court issues an opinion about a piece of legislation, how to interpret a law, Congress can fix that by going in and amending the legislation. But Congress can't fix the court's interpretation of the Constitution. That's the court's job. The only way we can change the interpretation of the Constitution is if the court changes its own mind, which we saw it do in Dobbs, but it does not do that very often. Or alternatively, if we force a constitutional amendment, we force that change through the amendment process.
I've got a question.
Yes.
You mentioned Buckley. It's been around almost 50 years, but it seems like since Citizens United that this money really took off after. What is in Citizens that wasn't in Buckley?
So you're absolutely right. Buckley was the beginning of the series of cases. Citizens United, there's a reason that some of these graphs go from 2010 to the present, because 2010 was the Citizens United decision. And what Citizens United did was open the floodgates to the creation of super PACs. And that had not happened before Citizens United. And so it was the unlimited giving to and unlimited spending by super PACs and then the dark money groups, which was the thing that Citizens United allowed to happen. And that's when this problem really took off. But it's not just a Citizens United problem, because there are, our general counsel, Brian Boyle, can give you the whole, rundown of the 8 or 10 important Supreme Court cases between 76 and still up to the present. But yeah, those were the two big ones, and Citizens United was the one that really opened the floodgates to the money coming in.
Well, thank you so much. Ann and Mike, we so appreciate you. Let's give them a round of applause for their presentation today.
Oh, and just one quick request. You have a survey on your table. I would really appreciate if you would take a moment to give us a little feedback. And if you're interested in getting an occasional email from American Promise, I promise we won't spam you, but put your name and email address on the bottom. But I will tell you, we are trying to get invitations from other Rotary clubs, and your feedback really helps. Thank you.
Thank you. And a book will be placed in the McShann Elementary School in your honor for speaking here today. Thank you so much. Next Friday, the Nasher is going to be the focus of our attention, and we're going to have Jeremy Strick come and speak to us. That is a great museum that maybe you have been there, but he's going to be speaking to us about that. Pam Carvey is our chair of the day. I'd like to take a moment to just say one word. I appreciate, I was sitting there just now. I wanted to ask questions throughout that entire presentation. I really did. There were things I wish I'd known a little bit more about. I appreciate you for waiting until the end of our time, end of their speaking opportunity, to ask those questions. That's really how it's in good order to do it that way. So I appreciate you for doing just that. Now, Barbara MARCUM is going to come lead us in the four-way test. Let's all stand.
Please join with me in the four-way test of the things that we think, say, or do. First, true. Second, is fair to all concerned. Third, will it build goodwill and better efficiency? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And you can ring the bell.
Oh, right. Where is it? Right here.
We are finished. Thank you.
Thank you.